Hi, Sally, I'm going to bring you over.
And if this like awful lighting doesn't change at some point, Kevin, I'll just turn my video off. But
Yeah, that's fine. Hi, Sally. Sally, you're on mute. It's fine. Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Hi, Sally.
Hello.
We're still a couple of slices short of
Anti-missing.
quorum, obviously. So I'm sure they'll be here momentarily.
Okay.
Waiting on Jim and Rebecca and Annie. And I'm very happy to see Jim Shea with us, which is great. Thank you so much. And we will bring you over anytime you'd like to talk. So that's awesome. And Jim is here, which is good. Dave, our recording secretary, has rejoined us, which is awesome. Hi, Dave. And so we're just waiting for Jim and now Annie and Rebecca. And sorry, folks, for the delay.
Kevin, I'm here, but I'm going to join the beginning audio only because I'm on the way back to the home office. I'll join you, but I'll be with you from now on.
Okay.
Did you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's a little broken up, but we'll be okay. Hi, Annie.
Hello.
So we're just short of Rebecca now. Give it one more second.
but we can take care of a little business while we wait because we have a quorum, right?
We do. We could jump down. Yeah, we could jump down to minutes and sort of take care of that. Why don't we do that? I will call the meeting to order at 6:02 and would like to do this via some roll call attendance for the record. So Kate Battles.
Here.
Annie Pfaff.
Yes.
Jim Bloschke. He might have trouble with his audio. Jim, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and Kevin Miller is present, so we do have a quorum. And hopefully Rebecca Deansrow will join us shortly. We're also joined by our recording secretary, Dave Monroe, back from his injury to our great happiness. And Sally Waters is going to present to us very shortly. So while we basically riff waiting for Rebecca, and maybe somebody could text her, Annie, could you do that? And just see if she's
Sure. Yep.
going to be, because I haven't heard that she's not going to be joining us. We can talk about the meeting minutes of April 12th, which Kate took for us in Dave's absence. And does anybody have any notes on the meeting notes? That Jim or Annie? Anything?
I do not know.
I just have actually one thing on let me grab this line 62. If Kate, you could just strike a the.
You got it.
Superfluous the in there, and then the other item pursuant to these minutes is at line 186, talking about the documents used in the meeting.
Yep.
I had a conversation with our very able town clerk on the subject, because I had been, it had been requested of me, when the minutes were going to be posted and when these are documents pursuant to 42 Main. It was, the asbestos report, the lead paint report, and then there was the two consultants reports, one from Scalora Consulting and the other one from the Batrick Design Studio. And I wanted to get some clarification about how those documents should be handled. And the recommendation of our clerk was to post them. And the reason being because I had already had, as I said, informal requests of them. And his advice was, there's sort of three criteria that come into play for documents, brought up during a town or during a board or commission meeting. And that's, are they physically present? Are they identified by name? And are they used at the meeting? And we didn't bring those documents up on screen, but they were certainly present for us, identified by name and of course discussed at the meeting. And the clerk's opinion on this point was that it would be better to file them with the meeting minutes because there was a very good possibility of a public records request shortly thereafter if we didn't file them. And so then we'd have to produce them anyway. So this is a matter of just sort of cleanness in terms of, here's Rebecca, I'm going to promote her. It's just a matter of cleanness in terms of the bookkeeping and the housekeeping of the process. So is everybody clear on sort of what the, and Jim Haggerty was very good and very comprehensive in his thinking on this. And he felt like, as I said, that it's just a matter of you post them because someone's going to ask for them anyway in a public records request, and then we have to come up with them. So if they already have them on file, they can deal with it more expeditiously. In fact, then they don't have to deal with a public records request, if that makes sense, because they're already posted. So it's all routine stuff anyway. There's no, secrets or surprises in any of that stuff. So that would be my only change, is just to add those documents to the end of the meeting minutes, and we'll post them. Everybody okay with that? Any objections?
No, I
That
actually
sounds good to
assumed that.
me.
I thought I had added, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I thought I had put those down,
Yeah.
no big deal.
Well,
Just
yeah,
let
I
me know,
just-
Kevin. Sorry,
Go
just
ahead.
let me know if you want me to make those edits or if you're gonna make them and submit them. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it was
either
just
way.
one. It was just one word, but oh yeah, you could add the, or I can do it, and I'll send them in. Okay, so where we're at now is going back to item 2 on our agenda, and Rebecca will note for the record that you're here. We did a little roll call attendance. You want to say here?
Here, I'm trying to find out what that is, so I'll be back.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So where we're at now is an update on 42 Main Street, the Dockstone House. And I'm very pleased that Jim Shea, who is the president of the Faye Board of Trustees, is able to join us tonight and hear Sally's presentation. There have been some developments with the property and in the process that I'd kind of like to update folks on tonight, and invite Jim, if he cares to speak, to raise his hand and chime in. But just to review for people who may watch the tape later, so to speak, where we're at on all this stuff. We received the application from Faye School for a demolition permit for 42 Main in early February. We met, I believe it was day 9 on a regularly scheduled meeting, February 17th. That was the mandated within the 10 business days review. And at that time, we discussed the property. And at that point, all you have to do is determine whether it is historically and or architecturally significant, take a vote on that. And if the commission believed it was such, it would trigger a full hearing, a further review on the property. And of course, we did find it both historically and architecturally significant on February 17th, and then moved on to the next step, which was on March 23rd, a walkthrough of the property that several of us attended, graciously hosted by Diane Byrne, who's the assistant head of school for finance and operations, by Brendan Giblin, who's one of the trustees, and Cheryl Trailer, director of facilities. And pursuant to open meeting requirements, all we could do at that point was walk through, look around, form our own opinions, but not discuss or debate. And then we all went home. So that was that. Then on April 12th, we met for the full hearing. That was quite well attended, so far as town hearings go, I think. And we heard from the applicant that was represented by Ms. Byrne and Mr. Giblin. We talked it through. We heard from at least a half a dozen citizen commenters on the matter. And then we took a vote, which, as you know, was 4-0 to preferentially preserve. That's the term that's used that triggers at the end of the hearing the 9-month hold on the demolition permit. Further developments after that have been on Saturday, April 23rd, there was an informational and what I would characterize as organizational meeting of the Historical Society. Be clear about the distinction again, that, you know, the Historical Commission, we're doing our business. The Historical Society, and, you know, in their curatorial endeavors and their advocacy endeavors, decided to meet on the subject of the property to discuss it. And there was a meeting led principally by Patty Burns-Fiore and assisted by Sally Waters, who's with us tonight. So Patty led that meeting, and Sally presented an extremely interesting historical presentation on the house as part of that meeting. Rebecca was present from the commission, and so was I. And we, of course, had to be careful not to, you know, have a quorum there. And so there were only 2 of us. And the reason I went was for 2 very, very specific reasons. One, to answer any questions from the Historical Commission about the actual functioning of the demolition delay bylaw process, so that people, you know, could have a clear understanding and not misperceive what the demolition delay bylaw entails and what it can do and what it cannot do. And so I went, you know, feeling it was, and again, of course, I think people understand that according even, you know, to the master plan, the town of Southborough, we are charged with working with the Historical Society whenever possible on matters such as these. So I wanted to go and officially represent the commission and simply explain the process. Were there any questions in the room? And secondly, to thank people that had assembled for their interest in the property, because I think, you know, public involvement is a very important part of the process. It was an important part of the public hearing we held, and I think it's an important part of the process going forward, particularly when the holder of the property, you know, is an entity, you know, such as Faye School or perhaps St. Mark's, that has a kind of civic connection. In other words, it's not simply a private property owner, it has a kind of larger implication. And so I went to, again, answer questions and to thank people for taking an interest, because I think, you know, we get the town we deserve, and we get the town that people advocate for, so that if the members of the Historical Society took an interest in the property and wanted to, you know, let their views be known on it, I'm certainly think that's, you know, part of the public conversation and an important part. So again, I went to thank them and to explain. There weren't, you know, too many questions, but I did get up and speak very, very briefly. Again, it wasn't my meeting. It was the meeting of the Historical Society, and I'm not a member of the Historical Society, but I was a guest and spoke. But you know, in the course of that meeting, it was a very good one, and people you know, feel very passionately about this particular property and its history. As I said, Sally gave such a fine presentation. It was my feeling that in the interest of, again, just a robust and fully informed conversation, that, you know, at the conclusion of it, kind of spontaneously, I think I went up to Sally and said, you got to give this at one of our meetings, because, you know, of course, during the public hearing, I had made my maybe feeble attempts to, you know, cover some of the history myself with regard to the house and the stuff available in the state database. and some of the history of Doc Stone, for instance, which is particularly striking to me and relevant, of course, to Faye's history. But I thought that Sally had done such a much better and more comprehensive job that I wanted to invite her over and, basically to turn over the meeting to her for a few minutes. And there's more to talk about after that, but I think I'd like to stop talking for a minute and let Sally take the reins and allow you to screen share and the whole thing. And I just want to make sure that I'm going to make you co-host, Sally, so that you can take over the screen.
Okay.
And can you take it away and you can screen share and bring up the material you have. It would be fantastic.
Never done this before, so let's see. I think this is what I want, and I want this. I'm trying to get it to the presentation view while it's thinking about what it's going to do here. First of all, I want to thank a number of people, first of all, including you who, you guys are out there on the front lines, having to deal with issues like this, which kind of enables me to be able to do what I love to do, which is just do a lot of research. And that's what I've done. I don't know why this is not going up to the, well, I've got the spinning wheel of death here. There we
Sally,
go.
we see your screen.
There you go.
Yeah, but I wanted to get it up to the this presentation. Okay, so a couple of other people that I really need to thank, of course, already mentioned Patty Burns Fiore, who put together this PowerPoint. I fed her a lot of information, and I have added a few things, but she does such wonderful work. And also Margaret Hart, who has lived in town all her life, has been able to get in touch with both Susan Stone and Jim Stone, children of Dr. Stone, and they've shared some things with me also, which has made it even more interesting. So the first few shots are just of the house before we get to the history. So I know you've all seen it many times. So what I did was do a lot of research on the early owners of the house. And I think it's important, and I mentioned this during the presentation at the Historical Society. We get all worked up when houses like 84 Main might be torn down, and they had very distinguished owners and so forth. And this house represents a lot more average group of people who have lived in it. And I think we sometimes forget about the average people and what they were going through. So the first owner was George Jennison, and his life was not an easy life. He was the son of Sylvester and Anna Amsden Jennison, and his mother died when he was 6 weeks old of consumption, and his father died when he was 8 years old. So he ends up by 1827, he's made the ward of Sylvester Brigham. And by the time he's 14, we find him in the church records donating money for the new stoves in the church. So he obviously was a very enterprising young man. And he did end up, he's listed throughout the 1840s and 50s as a member of the Southborough Militia. And then he did marry his first wife, Mary. And probably it's about this time of his marriage that he probably built or bought this house for his bride. And let's see, as it says on here, his occupation is listed as a shoemaker. So the end section that was the doctor's office, so for so many years, was probably his shoe shop. And after his first wife died in 1856, he married Eliza Faye. And you're going to notice the name Faye, ironically, turns up quite often in relation to this house. Not just Faye School, but there were Fays that were associated with it, which is not terribly surprising. The Fays were a very prolific family. I know that David Faye, who was late 17th century in Marlborough, had 6 sons who lived to adulthood and got married, and they all had more sons, but at least 2 of those sons had 20 children each. So there are obviously going to be a lot of Fays running around. After his first wife died, he did marry a second time, a woman named Eliza Faye, as I said, and but they moved out right after that marriage, and he became a farmer. And so when he died in what year was that? 1901. He and both his wives are buried at Rural Cemetery. And you may wonder why there's a poodle sitting there. Among other things, you can find out very strange little details. Among the dogs that were listed for the 1850s was George Jennison's dog, a white poodle, male poodle named Pink. And at the same time, we find out, speaking of 84 Main, that down the road, Joseph Burnett at that time had a St. Bernard. So anyway, the next owner was Artemis Moore. He was a retired farmer from Barry, Mass, and bought the house in about 1858. There really isn't that much to talk about him beyond what you see on the screen. He's listed as a gentleman in the 1860 census, so obviously he had retired. And he lived there with his wife Eliza and his daughter Eliza. There are a lot of Elizas in this story, until his death in 1862. But the 2 Elizas stay there for another 20 years until the mother died, and then the daughter moved to live with one of her sisters in Boston. And then the next owner is, oh my goodness, it's another Faye, Louis Faye Johnson. His mother was one of the Fays, and he bought the house in the mid 1880s, and he lived there for, probably about 10 years. And he is listed as a farmer in some censuses, but in his obituary, it mentions that he was the night watchman at St. Mark's School for many years. Now, he had a younger brother, Charles Johnson, and it's very interesting to read their father's will, because it's not Louis Johnson that inherits all the property in Southborough. It's the youngest son, Charles Johnson, who inherits the farm. And so I'm thinking that probably the older brother may have worked when he's listed as a farmhand. He probably worked for his brother. Charles did not live there, but he rented it out. And one man that we find out that he rented it out to was Hermitus Joseph Blanchette, who was from Southborough, and his wife Cordelia. This got to be really interesting because in the census of 1900, it says that the people living there were a family named John Blanchard and his wife Cordelia. And it listed all their children. And then in 1910, it's Hermitus and his wife Cordelia and all their children. And when I had to do an awful lot of digging before finally coming up with the fact that Hermitis and John are the same person. And my theory is that whoever the census taker was in 1900 was just very careless. Hermitis was a barber. And in doing my research, I was not able to find any photo of him. So we had to go with the sign there. And eventually he buys the house from Charles Johnson sometime before 1910, because by then he owns the house. And he operated the barber shop there at least until 1934. He's still listed as a barber in Southborough, but he's now residing at somebody else's house. His wife had died in 1933, and there seems to be a little pattern here. The wife dies and the men just don't seem to be able to carry on their own, so they end up being boarders somewhere else. So we have the history all the way from the first owner up to at least about 1935. And then there is, whoops. There is a little gap.
Wow.
All right, what's going on? I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. There is a little gap there between the 1935 to 1947 where I have not been able to, well, we know he bought it in 1947 from Eleonora Ozol of Natick, but I don't know if she is the person that owned it or bought it from the barber or not. So we have Doc Stone. He was, of course, educated at Harvard and Tufts, served as a major in the American Medical Corps, and came home with a Bronze Star. Bought the house in 1947, retired in 93, Board of Health for 57 years, and died at the age of 101. And the next couple of photos are a couple that Jim Stone, his son, gave to me to use. You can see that this was two separate houses at one time. And Doc Stone in about 1953, I think he said, 49, built something to join the two houses together. So there's the barber shop sitting there at the end, and the main house. So now you can see it with the being joined together. And he talked about the middle section, including the current kitchen, was added, and both sets of stairs, one to the office section and one to the basement of the two-story house, were added at that time. Not having seen it, I can't visualize quite what he was talking about, but I thought I would include it because he thought that was important. And then just one last thing. They said, well, you know, the first minister of in Southborough was the Reverend Nathan Stone. So, you know, we have this historic district with that house being part of it, and of course the old burial ground being part of it. And it turns out that they thought there might be a connection. So I did a little digging, and so to speak, and it turns out that his great-grandfather, Simon Stone, is Dr. Stone's, the minister's great-grandfather is Dr. Stone's 8th great-grandfather. So there is that little tie to the early history of Southborough also. Okay. And then up to the present. And the rest of it has to do with trying to figure out ways to preserve the house, I think. So
Kelly, can you go back those photos of the actual separate section are absolutely right there. That is fascinating. And because it appears that the supposition that I know you and I had talked briefly about, it's that section where the bay window is. That is really the connective tissue between, you know, this barber shop, and it has of course, the kind of barn side on the middle road side where, you know, it's just garage basically space, and then the main house, which comes around to that porch in the front. And so there is that one, you see the one little gap that apparently Dr. Stone filled in. Having been in the house, I can understand what his son was talking about. You know, there's a stair that goes roughly from the back end of that filled in section that goes up to the second floor and one down to the basement. So this is really, from an architectural standpoint, it's really fascinating and extremely helpful. And to see how the original, Greek revival structure was, knitted in to the commercial end of the house. At the what's now the easternmost section, the middle road section of the house. So those are wonderful photos. I think we're very fortunate to have them.
Oh.
Was that, are we at the end?
Well, yeah, really. I mean, the rest was
this is really helpful, and I hope that seeing that is because if you go back to the red, can you go back one more?
That one?
Because I don't want to look at that one with my face and frozen. One more. Oh yeah, no, even there is good. I mean, you can clearly see it. There's a tree that sort of obscures the bay window. But you can clearly see the sort of original structure, and then there's a kind of at the roof line, there's a step down to that very, it's relatively narrow section of maybe 10 to 15 feet that probably separated, the original structure from the workshop on the end. And that's supported, of course, and as I'm sure you know, by the records that we had that suggested originally what amounts to the barn, the barber shop, the doctor's office had been separate from the rest of the house. So it really tells a very interesting story. I mean, I think one of the things that I found very instructive when the state people were here, working with us on the National Register stuff, is how it is not always necessarily the absolutely, let's say, unadulterated, pure version of the building that's of value, that there's a story to be told here about the development of Southborough. Over this is a house that has in total 172-year history. And you really see that, going from the original house in the middle of the 19th century to this, very early. What is the date you have on the easternmost portion of the house, the barber shop, doctor's office?
Well, it's an assumption that Mr. Jennison used it for his shoe shop because he's a shoemaker. Yeah.
Right. So turn of the 20th century, is that a fair?
No, he had he had sold the house by 1858. So
okay. So house and workshop essentially separate, and then finally in the middle of the 20th century knitted together with this very short, rather ingenious section. It reminds me of that Annie Pfaff lives in such a house where the barn is attached to the house, so you don't have to go outside in the winter kind of thing, or in bad weather, you just pass. That basically what was done there, and it tells a very, very interesting story. Like I said, one of the things that I found so instructive from the state people on the subject of the National Register is that this is the exact kind of building that they value extremely highly, because on the one hand, it has this very pure Greek revival lines on the one end of it, and then on the other, it tells a story about the development of commerce. And the way people live their lives in Southborough. And, unfortunately, the I know so many people in town that have talked to me with just about tears in their eyes about how sentimental they feel about Doc Stone. And I think part of it is that, thing where you could knock on the doctor's door in the middle of the night and get help, rather than rushing to an emergency department. And so I found it very interesting that it tells such a kind of fascinating story again about not only architecture, but about the way people live their lives and the relation of commerce and everyday life in the center of town for 170 years. So thank you so much, Sally. I'm very appreciative. Is that you have no more art for us, right?
No.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. Can you unshare so we can get back to a full screen? And this may be thank you.
Got it.
You did that beautifully. And again, I don't know if I said it. I somehow in my addled state, I think I neglected to say that I was present at the meeting, but I'm here as well. And I don't know if I said that, Sally is the vice president of the Historical Society, and I'm very appreciative of your time and all the work you put into this. And I think it's really interesting and really helpful. So thanks so much, Sally.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you all.
Take care. Now, I note that, all right, I'm just going to, I'm just trying to manage some screens here. Okay, that we do have Jim Shea, who is the president of the Faye Board of Trustees. Jim, I'm not to put you on the spot in any way, but if you're interested in sharing any information or asking questions or saying anything about the project, I would love to welcome you into the meeting. So I don't see, Jim may be listening, but unable to talk for us at the moment. I will say, just in terms of the other thing that I didn't mention in leading up to Sally is that subsequent to the April 23rd meeting at the Historical Society, which, as I mentioned, I did attend, to try to provide some information and to thank people for taking an interest. There was an article in the May 6th issue of the Community Advocate, which did cover it. It was actually on the front page here, and it was actually a very extensive story. And it was Dakota Anselman, who I believe is a managing editor of the Community Advocate, came out and reported on it. And it was actually a very long and I thought very good and very fair and balanced story. It represented the thoughts of the folks representing Faye. It represented what went on in this during our hearing, and it also represented what went on in the meeting of the Historical Society and what their views on the matter were. So I thought that was helpful, actually, again, because I think the only the way forward for all of us is through as much sort of public exposure and public conversation as possible. I will say that in my mind, there have been some interesting developments. I was made aware in the last couple of days that Faye was thinking further and more deeply on the whole matter of the stone house. And I did reach out to Mr. Shea, and we've had a very cordial exchange the last couple of days on the subject. And I will just say that I'm very encouraged. And I think Faye, if I feel at liberty to share that Faye is taking the matter very seriously, looking into it very seriously and very deeply, and is in talks, as I understand it, to select one of two very prominent, very experienced and very, very talented and credentialed preservation architects to give this matter a much deeper dive. And so I very much welcome that news. I think it's great for all concerned, and I see the opportunity here for something really terrific to come out of this, because I would leave that to Mr. Shea if he cared to say who he was considering, but I will just say that I'm quite impressed, and I think when at such point that that becomes known, people will be well pleased in terms of the steps that Faye is taking. So that's where I'll leave it at the moment. I will say that I have had conversations with several folks on the select board on the subject, and they are quite interested, as well as on the planning board. And again, I think there are three paths available, which is part of what's really quite exciting here. Number one is, for Faye to determine that there is in fact institutional usage for this building. And I personally think it could be quite the showplace for the school, a point of tremendous pride and a kind of cornerstone statement by the school at the corner of Main and Middle Road, right at the beginning of their campus. Secondly, there is the possibility, if the school should decide after consultation with their experts that letting it go is the right move. I know there's been interest by people in converting it back to a private residence. There is also options under the adaptive reuse bylaw, for instance, with a home business. Thirdly, there is the question of a possible town ownership, and that's a more distant possibility, but I think it's on the table. So I think there's quite a lot of interesting things going on here. And again, I am, so far as I'm concerned, our relationship and my relationship with the Faye representatives have been wonderful. And I expect that to continue and only to get better. And so I'm very, very happy to report, again, that's all I really want to say about it, that the school is showing a very serious-minded commitment, I think, to thinking about it and to looking further and engaging in conversation. And I think the public presentations, the talk by the advocacy, frankly, by the Historical Society is a valuable part of that, because it gets people interested and engaged and understanding, what we have in front of us. So again, I'm really thankful to everybody who's been involved up until this point, and I look forward to sort of the continuing conversation. If anybody on the commission wants to weigh in, I mean, I know what I'm saying is vague, but what I would encourage everybody on the commission is to sort of trust the process, because I think, again, good things are going to come the way of this property, and just people need to be focused and thoughtful about it, and let give Faye school time to do their due diligence, which I have every confidence that they're engaged in. So I don't know if Annie or Jim or Kate, I know Rebecca's continuing to have technical difficulties, but she's with us. If you guys wanted to say anything.
I guess I just add that I was encouraged when I saw their letter that they are going to commission a investigation to find out if any remains are there.
Oh, you're on. Yeah, you're jumping ahead to St. Mark's, Jim.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I am.
Yeah, I get it. I do it all the time, but I say Faye when I mean St. Mark's, and St. Mark's when I mean Faye. But
senior moment. Sorry. So yeah, back on the Faye school ownership thing. Let's see how it plays out. I guess we've got 9 months, and hopefully we'll get a indication of whether they're going to preserve it or try and find a buyer.
My comment is, I'm really happy with how the process is going. I think that, it's showing our collaborative nature, and I'm really happy to hear that Faye is looking into this a little further, and I think they know where we stand, and where so many of our neighbors stand and about the building, and they're looking into all the options. I think that's really positive, and we're working collaboratively in that process, which is great. So I look forward to continuing conversations, and as Jim said, see where we can get this in the next 8+ months, as we oversee the demolition delay.
Great. Anybody else?
I don't have anything further to add, really, beyond the fact that I think this is really great positive news, and I agree that it's just a step in the right direction, that we're all able to communicate and collaborate. And I will say that Rebecca would like to say something, so if you can promote her to panelist, Kevin.
Yeah, I brought
yeah.
her back.
I should be
Rebecca's-
there. Am I there?
Oh, she's back. Okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm on my phone.
Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. So I just wanted to say quickly, well, that's really great news. And I did see somewhere while I was researching something else that National Historic Registered properties can be eligible for assistance with things like asbestos abatement. And they definitely should look into that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rebecca, and that's exactly true, of course. And that was one of the points, when we were going over all that matter with the state officials, that they were very explicit that now that 42 Main is a major contributing property to the new downtown historic National Register district, it is eligible
Great.
for some funding. So that I hope, again, Jim Shea is with us, that that can be noted as a possibility. And if that helps, wow, we will do what we can to help, get that money if we can do anything about it. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, terrific. I'm encouraged. That's great.
Great. All right. Well, we have a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to move on. And again, if Mr. Shea, at any point there may be technical issues, but if you want to ring in, please do. Meanwhile, we will move on. Item 3 is a chair's report, and I've got a couple things here. First of all, I wanted to update the commission on our ARPA request for funding for signage marking self-same, Southborough Center Historic District. The ARPA committee, I've been watching fairly steadily. I may have missed a most recent meeting, but the last I saw, they have a system where they were putting things into 3 categories: green light, which mean they, in theory, support, although they hadn't taken a final vote; red, we don't like it; yellow, we need more information. And they had, the last I saw, moved us into the green light category, which was, of course, naturally very pleasing to me, and I thank them for their support. And I have tried to, within the bounds of good taste, whenever I have the opportunity, make the point to some select board people and others that there's ample good reason when the time comes to really decide to pony up on this. Number one, of course, there is no better way to kick off a tercentenary drive, for the 2027 300th anniversary of the town, than unveiling a bunch of very beautiful signs marking our historic downtown, now recognized on a national level for the first time. Number two, it would help create a sense of the downtown, which certainly jives with the EDC's initiatives to create a sense of there. And I have noted to people that one of those signs is ticketed for the townhouse that we're spending, several $100,000 on sprucing up. And to me, a nice plaque marking it and its importance would sort of be the cherry on that sundae. And finally, there's the fact that our proposal, which was specific down to the dollar, amounts to 0.87% of the total funds available, less than 1%. So this is a lot of bang for a very short buck. So that's my pitch, and I'm sticking with it. And I hope we make some headway there. Second point, I received, or I was approached actually by a neighbor recently, and this is my item B here, about citizen concern regarding damage to headstones in the old burial ground. And, you know, it was a sunny day when this neighbor approached me on this point, and I thought, oh, I don't really want to hear this, but I am, of course, obliged to in my position. And he explained to me actually that he had recently been in the old burial ground and had noted what he felt was actually damage to the point of vandalism, and was so concerned about it, in fact, that he had filed a police report. You know, officers of the Southborough Police Department met him at the old burial ground, looked at what he was talking about, and said, again, this is, I have this secondhand, so, but I report what I was told, that he said, they looked at it and said, yeah, that looks like somebody was trying to do damage. So I went down there over the weekend and took some photos of what I believe he was talking about, and would like to share my screen for a moment and just show you what I saw. So I'm going to do that if I manage it properly. Okay, hang on a second. Can you all see that? It's just a quick review of what's going on at the old burial ground. Now, this first photo is in fact simply one that and I'm looking for my notes here on this subject. Boy, I hope I don't have trouble. I don't know what I did with them. This is a stone that's been there for ages, but it gives you an idea. There's sort of a much larger conversation to be had at some point here about why, for instance, there's a headstone leaning up against the stone wall. And that wasn't the damage, because that's been there since the day I moved to town. But this, I believe, is one of the things he was talking about. And, you know, a headstone like this is attached. You can see on the base of it, there are two rods that, you know, rusted out, or that, you know, give way over time, decay. However, how the top part of that ends up on the ground, it wasn't a raccoon and it wasn't the wind. It was something presumably much more intentional. And to my eye, that looks fairly recent. And I apologize sincerely for the fact that the notes I have on what these photos are, I have now mislaid. This may be it. Nope, sorry. I was going to be able to tell you who that was, and whoever that was, a Brigham. That's who it is. I can see it, but I also remember it because I actually looked all these people up. And many of them get mentioned in Fences of Stone, for instance. But one of the Brighams died in 1840. There it lies. There it is, Lowell Brigham. And I'm glad I remembered right, or I feel kind of foolish. This is another one. This has been there for a while. Another broken stone that is face down. So I have no idea who it is, and I'm not going to move it to try to find out for fear of damaging it further. But it does call attention to what I do think is a problem in the old burial ground. This was the one that I was approached about, this headstone. And golly, boy, I wish I had my note on this, because I just cannot remember, but I'll get to it. When you look at this stone from the back, what you see is, imagine when something is rocked back and forth and somebody's trying to push it. like the ground gets compressed and then it comes back this way and there's a big gap. The neighbor told me they saw somebody in there pushing. And it, you know, I touched it and this stone now rocks back and forth. And as the photo indicates, this is a veteran. So I was upset, you know, because it did look to my eyes as well, and apparently to the police, and again to a neighbor down the street, that somebody was up to kind of no good with this particular stone. This is another one that's been there much longer, another broken stone. This is William T, and I forget the last name. I'm really aggravated with myself to having lost a man who died in 1843, age 24. That I do recall, and I think you can see it on the stone. Lastly, I will just note, that's a photo that I took on Saturday, right? That with that branch is down. That's the same branch, and I took that photo in February. I'm a little obsessed, I'll admit. So the point is, 3 months later, there it is. And I say this not to editorialize in some, uber dramatic way. Oh, well, there when I X'd out, I had the descriptions in the file descriptions to make some uber dramatic case about this. But I do think that, there's clearly an issue in the old burial ground. I think it's been known about for a long time. I feel almost churlish for bringing it up because I know some people don't really want to hear it, but I would like to figure out a way to, and, so when the neighbor asked me about this, knowing that I was, now chair of historical, he said, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I don't have any authority. I hate to say it. I have no power. I don't control, and I have really no desire to exercise authority in the old burial ground. I would just like to see the broken stones picked up, the branches taken away, the trees trimmed in such a way that they don't endanger the stones that we have left. I would like to see some preventative measures against vandalism potentially. I would like to see respect for our veterans, even if they died 150 or 200 years ago. I would like to see things that I believe in my heart, just about everybody in town would support. So what I propose is that we get very serious about how we can approach the select board in a collaborative, constructive, friendly way, and just say, I don't want to run this, but I would just like to bring everybody's attention. But we're willing to. We're willing to take the reins, and possibly fundraise, possibly work with the DPW, possibly work with outside contractors to figure out what we need to do to show some respect for our veterans, for our dead, and for our history, and by extension for our neighbors who care about this stuff too. Like I said, I wasn't looking for this conversation. It was brought to me and sort of laid at my feet. And I said, well, I'm obliged to take it up, So again, I want to, if you folks have any thoughts on how we go about this, I am willing to approach select board members and say, again, we want to be friends and pals here and work with y'all and help, because we'd like to think that we're some pretty able and maybe even smart people, and maybe we could help get something done with this. But I don't know if, I know there's all a lot of past, which I'm not interested in. I'm not interested in that old history and any kind of pre-existing animus that may be present. I'm interested about today, that stone that I could see wobbling in the graveyard. I want it fixed, you know? And I don't have any authority. So is that something that you all would entertain kind of taking up?
Yes, Kevin, and I think we should definitely approach the selectmen, but also be clear that we don't really want, well, we don't advise that just anybody goes and props the stones back up again. That has to be they have to be professionally reset and,
right.
You know, by.
Right, and I think that would be understood that, you know, it's such a fragile asset, and that, you know, that's a smart crew, you know, so let's find a way to do it and do it together. And I, you know, I thought to myself, for instance, I've done some reading on this of late, and even the matter of trees in the cemetery, you've got all these, you know, stumps, and before I was better educated, frankly, on it, I would say to myself, well, what if they go in there and grind those up, you know, get rid of those? You can't, in fact. That's not best practice. You know, it's not like having a stump in your yard. You call some guy, you know, we had one, Raven Stump. He comes and he grinds it up and makes a big mess. You rake it up for days, and that's it. You know, there are certain protocols that have to be followed with all this kind of thing. But I believe, for instance, that actually retreeing the old burial ground ought to be a very high priority for the town. It's a quality of life issue. It's an aesthetic issue. And I actually see it as a path. I have some thoughts on this, which I'll save for another time, but as a path to a certain kind of healing, because I think the local veterans organizations, I have a sort of scheme in the back of my mind to involve them, I think, in the most positive way possible, because I think sort of planting of trees can be linked to, because I know there was the past controversy about flags and all that stuff, that there's a way to sort of bind people together and make some progress that I think involves better curation of the old burial ground. Because, you know, frankly, it was an added stab to me that it was not only a grave marker potentially being vandalized, but it was one belonging to a veteran that was sort of doubly hard to take. So I think, and maybe we'll just leave it at that for now, and I'll start making some overtures. But I think there's a path forward for this, and I feel both an imperative to do it from the standpoint of our duties as historical commissioners, and as a moral question personally. I'd like to get somewhere on this, so I'll leave it at that. Third and finally, mercifully, on the chair's report is the matter of the Historical Commission and the Tercentenary Committee. I sent an email to the select board asking that they set aside, when they go to constitute that committee, that they set aside a seat specifically earmarked for the Historical Commission. And it was a very short email, simply saying that, you know, we were enthusiastic about, again, pitching in and doing our part, and that we hope that they shared the belief that it was not only sensible for us to have a seat on a commission or a committee charged with, you know, organizing the celebration of the town's 300th anniversary, but it was an essential condition of such a committee, and that I hope that they would agree. I did hear almost immediately back from two members of the select board in the affirmative. So I feel pretty good about that, and I thank them for it. And we'll see how that goes going forward. So that's an optimistic note, and again, an optimistic note about working, you know, together. I was very happy about that very positive response I got. Item 4, this is some big stuff here, and good news. Discussion of St. Mark's Triangle project developments and recent progress of St. Mark's Street Park Working Group. As you folks know, we have some big news on that subject, and really good news for everybody in the town. It is a good day here on the Historical Commission. It is also a good day for St. Mark's, because yes, as you know, again, just to back up for those playing along at home, when the St. Mark's Triangle was cleared in early November, then our then chair, Michael Wyson, was immediately in contact with the State Historical Commission, as he felt it was his duty to do. And they sent somebody out to look at the parcel and to look at the matter. And they went back with their report and whatever information and documentation Michael had. That was turned over to the state archaeologist and the executive director of the Mass Historical Commission. And she issued a letter on November 9th of 2021, which has been entered into the public record, about what the Mass Historical Commission felt ought to be done to investigate the possibility of unmarked Native American burials in the Triangle. And the matter sat, that letter, went to our DPW head, the director of facilities at St. Mark's, Cheryl Tony Holly of the Nipmuc Tribal Nation, Jim Peters from the Commission of Indian Affairs, and Jeffrey Shrimpton of Mass DOT. Mr. Wyson also forwarded the communication to our select board. So the matter sort of stayed that way for a while. And then, as you know, we sent our own letter on 7 February 2022 to various officials at St. Mark's. And it was simply calling their attention, again, to the existence of Ms. Simon's letter from November, and pointing out that, we felt that our obligation by the terms of the state, statute making for the formation of historical commissions, that it was our responsibility to bring the information we had to the state, to let their professionals evaluate it, and then to act upon their recommendations. And that's no more or no less than what we were doing. We got the advice from the state. They're the full-time professionals. They issued their opinion about what should be done. And our letter was simply essentially, although it ran to just over 2 pages, but it was essentially saying, this is what we think you should do, and we hope you'll do it. At that point, then we waited. And of course, the park working group got going, and they were doing their yeoman work and discussing various aspects of the project. And I had a conversation with Rob Kuklovich at one point about our letter. And it was very cordial and very productive, and he's a great guy. And, we thought, all right, we hope you'll think about it. And, people had asked me, over the intervening months, well, what's going on with that? What's going on with that? And I said, well, they need time to think. I think this is a very complicated, as everybody knows in town who's followed this even peripherally, this has been a very, very, very complicated affair with a whole lot of moving parts and a whole lot of people involved. But, my feeling from the get-go has been that the Historical Commission had to absolutely stay in its lane and concentrate on the one thing that we felt we had an absolute duty to pursue, which was the matter of the gravesite. So I was in favor of, letting them think, basically, and letting the matter play out, and let's see where this is going to go. Well, it has all turned out extremely well, as it turns out, because I spoke with Mr. Kuklovich yesterday, and we had a long conversation, a very good one. And shortly after the conclusion of that, he hit send on a letter to the Southborough Historical Commission, which I want to read. It's pretty short to get into the record. And it's dated May 11th, which is yesterday. Addressed to the Southborough Historical Commission, 25 Common Street, Southborough, Mass, and the zip code. Dear members of the Historical Commission, I write today on behalf of St. Mark's School in response to your letter from earlier this spring. He's referencing the 7 February letter. When the town of Southborough initially approached St. Mark's School to engage in a project to improve land adjacent to Marlborough Road, the school was interested in this project primarily because it allowed for increased life safety while simultaneously adding a park, ultimately benefiting all citizens of the town. We agreed to the request to provide roughly 31,000 square feet of land to the town in exchange for approximately 16,000 square feet of land to be provided to the school. We were particularly interested in the life safety benefits of having a wider turning lane for fire trucks and other emergency vehicles turning on St. Mark's Street from Route 85 as a result of the work. St. Mark's is interested in being a partner to the Historical Commission and the town as the town's project moves toward completion. As noted in your letter, the Historical Commission is committed to working productively and in good faith with all concerned parties, and we are committed to working with you. To that end, we will hire a cultural resource management firm specializing in historic archaeology of New England to conduct a survey of the construction site to determine whether or not this land contains evidence of an indigenous people's burial site. The firm will obtain the necessary approvals from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we will keep the Historical Commission updated on the results of the survey as well as any resulting next steps. The school is aware of the recent discussion of this project at the recent town meeting, and we understand the high level of interest in the project. We are committed to a strong partnership with the town, as well as with the Historical Commission, and appreciate the interest of both the citizens of Southborough and members of the commission. We will be in touch soon to follow up with additional information. Sincerely, Rob Kuklovich, Chief Financial and Operations Officer, St. Mark's School. And Rob made it clear when we spoke on the phone that he was acting on the full authority, obviously, of the head of school. And, you know, this is what St. Mark's is going to do, that they are going to do the dig, basically. They're going to do the investigation, which is what, you know, we have wanted all along. Needless to say, I was delighted, very happy. And this is, you know, a big day and a big moment in my mind, not for the Historical Commission, but for the town and for St. Mark's School and for every citizen in town and for everybody who cares about doing the right thing. And I number St. Mark's right at the top of that list. They have thought about it, they've reviewed it, they've listened to the town, and they have acted. And so I'm quite over the moon. I will add that Rob did not specify in the letter who they were hiring, but he has shared that with me and made it clear that it's okay that I share that with you. And that is a company called Archaeological Consulting Services. They are out of Guilford, Connecticut, and I have done my diligence on them, and they are the real deal. A very, very, very good firm. You can, those of you in the peanut gallery that want to look them up, ACA, C as in consulting, S as in services, archaeology.com. Takes you to their very impressive website, and they have experience. I'm looking over my other screen now, and archaeological reconnaissance surveys, intensive archaeological surveys, meaning digging, data recovery and mitigation, construction monitoring, public outreach and planning, Native American studies, museum collections and materials analysis, historic research, and so on and so forth. Their references are impressive. Their client list includes state agencies, federal agencies, regional agencies, a raft of private companies, colleges and museums, architects and engineers, environmental service organizations. This is not a rinky-dink outfit. It's the same, this has been kind of thrilling, maybe 48 hours for me personally, because not only, do you have Faye on the cusp of hiring some people that I think people are going to be very pleased to hear when they find out who it is. But also St. Mark's now is coming forward on this separate issue of the triangle and really doing the right thing, to the point, in fact, that I had further communication with Mr. Kuklavich today on the subject. They want to get the permits and get this rolling as quickly as they possibly can. And there's good reason for that, of course, because this is the time to make hay. And he was asking me some questions relative to the information that was shared with the Mass Historical Commission back in November, because it's, without getting into the weeds on it, it concerns the application for permits, because they have to be state permits, and how that's going to go forward. So I'm trying to help. I was already, I already spent time this afternoon trying to help him out on that. And I was actually back in touch with Brona Simon at the state office to try to get the information that they're looking for. So they're not wasting any time. They made the decision. They sent the letter. It was the email that CC'd me. This letter also went to Mr. Purple at the townhouse. And I know that Mr. Purple shared the letter and the information with the select board. Mr. Dennington, as vice chair of the working group, also shared it with the members of the working group. So everybody is fully informed. But now I get to say so in public, and I'm thrilled. And I thank St. Mark's absolutely from the bottom of my heart. I have a really good relationship with them. I think they like us a little bit as well. And I'm so glad that again, we told them what we wanted. We stood on the principle of it, which I thought was the right thing. We didn't overreach. We were nice. We let them think about it. And lo and behold, we've gotten a very good result. And like I said, I see, it's tempting to think of this as a win, but I don't think of it that way, except insofar as it is a win for the town. It's a win for some, getting to the bottom of it. And, there's all kinds of other things involved in this project that are floating around out there. I don't care about that stuff so insofar as the Historical Commission is concerned, because none of that other stuff is any of our business. What is our business? I think we've got a really, really, really good result on. So I don't know if any of you folks want to say anything about that, or.
I'll just echo that it's really great news, and heartening that St. Mark's is stepping up to do this. What we know is the right thing, and being a good partner on this, and I'm grateful again for our partnership.
Yeah, it's just and they really have been. I must say, it has been a pleasure. I have a very, very easy and good relationship with Mr. Kuklavich, and that really helps. I think I'll say further that in the email that he sent with me, covering the letter initially, he mentions that we are looking at the possibility of some of our students and members of our history department learning about this process and partnering with the Historical Commission. And maybe we could also partner with Algonquin High School's history department if they are interested in it as well. And my response to that was, by all means, and whatever we can do. And I may be coming back to you as this sort of unrolls, and it may happen pretty quickly to get some of you to be a kind of liaison, if you're willing, to some of the schools. And we did talk actually about Faye as well. Again, you've got to be careful because we don't want to get underfoot of the professionals that are going to be doing this work. But it had been my position, actually with Rob from very early on, that I did see an educational opportunity here, done in a respectful way, given that we may be dealing with native burials. So that's also good news. The other thing I wanted to say was relative to the work of the St. Mark's Park Working Group, because they deserve a lot of credit for what they've done and continue to do. Mr. Blanchard, Dan Blanchard, on that committee brought forward an idea in their last meeting that I thought was really quite fascinating, and may point a way forward, regardless of what is or is perhaps not found as a result of this investigation and dig that St. Mark's is going to engage in. Dan Blanchard did some research about the whole business of unmarked graves potentially throughout Southborough, focusing, of course, on the Triangle area, proposed park area, but not restricted to that. And he had come up with a list of, I believe it was, I want to say 111, something in that vicinity, of potential unmarked graves throughout Southborough. And the list that he had included Native Americans, but also the poor, the penurious, people who are at the kind of, as you know, and if you read this Fences of Stone, towns in Southborough was no exception, had a rather unpleasant policy of ushering people they didn't want to be wards of the town to the town border and saying bye. But that list included, the poor, Native Americans, indentured servants, and potentially, surprisingly enough, a couple of slaves. This would be going back into the 18th century. And so what the essence of what Mr. Blanchard was sort of discussing is that possibly once you could get past the investigation and find out what was there or what wasn't there, that this, if I understood him correctly, that this ground could possibly be used to as a place, and I'm very much, I sort of ran with this mentally, used as a place of sort of quiet contemplation and to make note and to mark and to remember all of those people who are unremarked, unrecorded, unregistered. And to me, the way this formed in my mind was, these are the people outside the walls, right? We have the walls of the old burial ground. And that's where, people who had money, people who had status, people who had authority, people who were recognized in the town were interred. But that he has a list of over 100 people outside the walls, outside polite society, outside the history, outside, outside. And I guess I found that a very elegant sort of and moving, frankly, thought that a more expansive view of what we may end up memorializing there. And in fact, may well go beyond Native Americans, but it may also include, again, the poor, the disenfranchised, the impoverished, people that for a variety of reasons are outside the walls and unknown and unloved and unremarked. Well, they were loved, I shouldn't say that, but unremarked and unrecorded. And I thought possibly, and I spoke about this actually with Rob at St. Mark's the other day, and he was quite taken with the thought as well. So I just throw it out there that, and I'd like to talk further with people on the working group about this, that I think there's some nice potential here as a very much a kind of, and I say this not in a cliche way, but as an inclusive sort of gesture where we bring together the thought that we are going to use this small space as a quiet place to think about all those that society has overlooked or forgotten. And I think it could, done correctly and with some sensitivity. I think there was discussion on the working group about, for instance, perhaps a monument that simply was a plaque with these names, and the notation that there may be others that we don't know about. Could be a very elegant and, again, kind of moving gesture that could bring people together that have been quite divided, over the course of this. But again, the first step is, for us, was and is and now will be the investigation. And so I have nothing but gratitude and thanks to our partners at St. Mark's for stepping forward. Anybody want to weigh in on this? Or should we just be happy? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm so grateful to the work of the St. Mark's Street Park Working Group and to St. Mark's for their willingness to do this, where this is great. It's really exciting news. So we're thankful to both.
Yeah, and I'll say again that I'm well aware, I'm not, I attended town meeting. I know there's a whole bunch of other stuff swirling around with this, but we set, as a commission, we set our sights on one thing and one thing only, because we thought that was the first principle involved with this. And so I'm so happy that St. Mark's agrees, and they're gonna do it, and we'll go from there. And the rest of it will take care of itself. And the people who are charged with taking care of it will figure it out. But what we're concerned with, just feels like I said, a big win for every citizen of this town and for the school. So I applaud them and I thank them. Should we go on?
I guess the only thing I'd add, Kevin, is that I'm glad we got them to do the right thing finally, but we're closing the door after the cow got out, considering the construction and all that went on.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I think everybody involved wished the carts on this wagon had been aligned slightly differently and had been done, but from the standpoint of trying to get the best solution that we can, I think this is it. And I couldn't be more appreciative. And, when I started to research into ACS, the company that St. Mark's is going to use, I was like, all right, this is for real. And I knew that would be the case, but it was just very satisfying to sort of look into it and say, wow, and they're not wasting any time. Like I said, they announced this to me yesterday. Today, they're already working on it. So congratulations and good on them.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
I know that the letter from St. Mark's mentioned, looking for indigenous burial ground, but I assume this is that anything they uncover, any evidence of any burial, because we don't know who's there. It could be anybody.
Right.
It could be any of those other people that were, disenfranchised that you were talking about. And we already do know that there are graves outside the wall in a different area. So I'm assuming they'll report back on anything they find, and I think that the solution to make it a you know, a contemplative spot for anyone is just terrific, wonderful. Really
Yeah,
like it.
I think I feel like there's some support on the working group from what I can gather. Rob at St. Mark's is very receptive to the idea, and I'm just sort of kind of smitten with the thought, you know, of a much more inclusive
Yeah, it's
thing,
terrific.
you know, that we could, this is the place to remember everybody that polite society, so to speak, and that's probably the wrong phrase, but you know what I'm getting at, had
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of forgotten, overlooked. So
Love it.
yeah, it's just great. So, all right, I'll go on then. I had hoped, and we're really getting long in the tooth, so I'm going to make this quick. Item 5 is the demolition delay bylaw rules and regs sort of revision process. And this goes back to the meeting we had on October 4th, 2021 with town council. And, you know, at that time, Michael had sort of worked up his proposed changes to both to the bylaw and perhaps more significantly to the rules and regs, because of course that was the thing that was tossed out. And if you remember, we met with town council, and you know, there was debate back and forth about the line. We had the documents up with the line comments and all that stuff. And you know, I don't know how many of you were able to rewatch that meeting. I did rewatch it in full and have been over and I think I know I sent those to you, the documents as they were being worked on with the line comments. And we have a lot to tackle on that point. We're not going to get to it tonight, obviously. But I'd like to divide some of this up and get us actually really sitting down and working on it and looking at it again and afresh. As I went through that meeting and made some notes, I mean, there were some highlights, which I'll run through really quickly. One was the proposal to increase from 10 days to 30, the amount of time that the commission would have to make an immediate reply, you know, to vote, whether it's historically or architecturally. And that I thought Mr. Tallerman was in support of that. I am in support of it. And I imagine that you all are in support of it, because it is sometimes a tremendous hardship, you know, to move that quickly. It was also the question of potentially a designee, basically, to do that step. And I recall from watching it that Annie opposed it. And I oppose it as well, as a matter of fact, because I think, especially if we have 30 days for that initial meeting rather than 10, there's no need for a designee. You know, we ought to be able to get our act together, in other words, in 30 business days and, you know, have that meeting. So but that's something we have to review. There was questions about section H, which was whether permits had to be in place for future use before you could demolish. And in the meeting, you know, Michael was insistent on the point, since it had come apparently from an MHC document, their recommended version, and town council was going to look at that. So we'll have to follow up on that. There was some language issues about consistency, whether it was preferably preserved or preferentially preserved. We need to clean up. There was designee versus appointed agent, although I would like to avoid either of those. There was Mr. Tallerman was going to review a section that was 63.6, which I won't get into at this point. There was questions on the rules and regs about whether an instrument survey was required, if you recall, with town council offering that it was not. And so we need to review that. When is a plot plan required? And that was something I need to go to the building commissioner and ask her about is what is required for a demolition permit in terms of a plot plan, because that would give us some clarity on what took up a lot of time on that call, was a sort of a debate about plot plans. There was the question of 25% or more demolition would put the bylaw into play, and we have to clarify that. We have to clarify whether or not it was town council's opinion that we can encourage an action plan but not require it, and I frankly agree with him. A couple of takeaways at the end where town council, and this is where we're at now, we have to get back on this, recommended that we talk. And he said, quote, "It's your bylaw, it's your town." He said, that he wanted to help us push boundaries with regard to historic preservation, but obviously, we have to be on the right side of this sort of legal question. He did note that the regs are value added and we could do without them. And we are doing without them now, of course. My personal preference is to get as much of it into the bylaw as possible and not being relying at all on rules and regs. I think we could have, in my ideal world, we have a very clear bylaw and we have simply a sort of flow chart sheet that helps people through the process, but doesn't add anything. To me, personally, I think it's the cleanest way to go. But in any case, the takeaway at the end of that long meeting was that, we need to sort of figure out exactly what we want, and he's going to help us get it as much as we can get. So what I would propose is I'm willing to work on this, but if a couple people, we could do up to 3 without having a quorum, of course, would be willing to sort of look some stuff over and pitch in on this. It would really be helpful. And we can sort of have basically a working group within the commission. And then once we get something, bring it to the full. And of course, now we are subject to, and I welcome it, the hearing requirement. Before we can do anything anyway. But this is something that I don't know if we can get it together in time for fall town meeting. But it should certainly be, I think, a very, very high priority now. So I don't know, does anyone have any thoughts on that or wants to volunteer to help?
Yeah, but I'm happy to contribute. Just tell me how I can add value.
Great, okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We've, kind of been talking about this update for what feels like a couple years. I think as long as I've been on the committee. So, picking it back up, I think is wise. I'm happy to help out if we need people on that working group, but also, if others are interested, I'm happy to sit out because I know you mentioned we're trying to be careful of quorum. So, just let me know.
Okay, well, I mean, it may be, Rebecca and Kate, your plates are full. Maybe myself and Annie and Jim can wrestle with this for a while. And I am happy then to step out and, and let one of you take over right now if you want. All of our eyes are eventually going to have to be on it. Of course, we'll discuss it in open session, set up a meeting with town council, hold the necessary hearing when we get to that point, and all that stuff. Katie, you were outside at a rowdy location?
I know, I'm sorry, I am. I keep
Kevin,
moving.
is this
Yes.
a time where we would also amend the cutoff from, I think it's 1925 to a rolling date?
Yeah, that has to be addressed. And I
It's a
think,
bylaw, though.
yeah, well, that's the thing. And of course, and I would want to speak with town council on this point. Of course, when you take it back as a bylaw change, you're opening up an immense can of worms. So
Yes.
that is going to have to be part of the consideration, and when is the best time for us to do it. But I just wanted to get it back on because, we've had a lot of distractions over the past 6 months or so. But I think it's time we get back to it. as soon as we can. So I will be in touch with Annie and Jim, and we'll try to get some things rolling. So
And hey, I'm always happy to offer up my editorial skills. That's
great.
a small skill set, but I can help with that.
Okay, so we've already done the meeting minutes for April 12th. Any other
I
business?
don't think we voted on the meeting minutes, though.
Did we? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, we didn't vote.
So I move to accept the meetings of April, minutes of April 12th.
As amended.
As amended.
As amended.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Kate Battles,
Yes.
Jim Blaschke,
Aye.
Denise Rowe,
Aye.
Annie Pfaff,
Yes.
and Miller says aye. So that's 5-0, Dave, to approve meeting minutes of April 12th. Now, other business that may come before the commission with the understanding that substantive deliberation may need to be postponed to a subsequent meeting to accommodate open meeting law. Actually, I have something on this point. I have two things very quickly. Number one is to remind you, dear folks, that the town's volunteer appreciation breakfast, did you get the memo on that? May 18th, 7 to 8:30 in the morning. I encourage you to rouse yourselves and attend. I believe
We
the
will be there
RS
with Dottie if you want to
yeah.
meet her.
Oh, okay. Now
That's
maybe
incentive.
about it.
That is incentive enough for me. I will be there.
Yeah.
You have to RSVP.
7 o'clock.
Yeah, well, come late.
It's an open house. It's not like you sit down and they have a presentation. It's just in and out, really casual.
Okay.
come get a Danish, and you can, dandle Dottie or something. Second item, very quickly, is during town meeting, there was a very interesting moment when Articles 27, which was if I remember correctly on the numbers, it was the tree bylaw sponsored by the planning board came up, and then Article 28, which was scenic roads. 27, the trees was indefinitely postponed to the fall by the sponsoring planning board, I believe at the request of the select board, in the interest of time. And then 28, which was the scenic roads article, as you know, was indefinitely postponed on the floor. I was of the opinion, actually, that was probably a good thing, because they, as I was telling someone, I view them as sort of peanut butter and jelly articles, that they go well together, the trees and this scenic roads articles. But in the course of the presentation from the planning board, on the scenic roads article, a slide came up, and I had actually followed this conversation, I thought, fairly closely, but I missed apparently one element of that. And that is, according to MGL Chapter 40, Section 15C, there are 3 town entities that can propose scenic roads. And they had and Don Morris was doing the presentation when this came up. And those 3 entities are, 1, the planning board, 2, the Conservation Commission, and 3, the Historical Commission. So I took note, and I particularly took note, and this is kind of a funny little detail, in that when they had that slide up, they had, the planning board, it was like 3 squares. They had the planning board with they have a nice little logo, and then they had the Conservation Commission, and they had a nice little logo. And then it said, in the third thing, it said Historical Commission, and it was the logo of the Historical Society.
Oh.
Oh, it was a little dagger to my heart. And let me be clear, I love the Historical Society. We just had Sally tonight, and she was great. We work with the Historical Society. We love the Historical Society. They're some of our best friends, and in fact, members of the Historical Commission are Historical Society members. However, I've been on a bit of a mission because I think it is best for the long-term health of both organizations that everybody gets straight that we're different things, we have different charges, we do different things. We work together, we love each other, but we're different, right? So I sent a little note to Mimi Luttrell and I just pointed this out to her. I said, I'm sure of the, however, 200 people in the room at that point, I was the only person to notice. Because you noticed that as well? All right, Rebecca. So 2 of us. I said, but I did notice, and I would just like my friends in town government to help us make this distinction, because it really is a kind of an important question. And I see it happening all the time. Now, a couple of things came out of that. One, I thought we got to get our own logo because we don't have one. Because Mimi was very sweet and she answered, oh, I'm very sorry. Send us your logo. And I'm like, I don't have one. We don't have a logo. So we got to get one. That's number one. Graphically inclined folks. Annie Pfaff. Wink, wink, somebody like that. You could, maybe you've got an idea. I know you print stuff and, right?
I can think about it. I don't have any ideas, that immediately come to me, but I'd be happy to look into this.
Yeah, this wasn't a pop quiz. I mean, I'm going to give you time to think about it, but if you want to work on it, that'd be awesome. So there was that, but the other part of it was, and this comes out of my own personal conviction on the subject, is that I thought there was, and this is in the spirit of working together better with other boards and commissions. I said, I kind of broached it essentially to Ms. Luttrell, is there an opportunity for us to work together? And my understanding is that, with the trees and the scenic roads being held off till fall, and I know there was some disagreement. This is why scenic roads got held. There's some people that had different opinions about it. However, in the spirit of partnership, is there an opportunity for us actually to work together? And let me give you the rationale behind this. I personally believe the goal of basically of the scenic roads thing is to protect trees and stone walls in town. And those, to my mind, are historic assets. And in fact, there are trees in this town that are older than any built structure. And, of course, there was that one torn down recently, or, chopped down or whatever, over by where Park Central was going to, there was that big kerfuffle about the tree was older than the town. Like 350 years old. And I personally value certainly at least certain trees in the town and stone walls. And it's, after all, what is the official town history? It's not fences of clapboard, it's fences of stone, right? Those stone walls are historic assets. The trees are historic assets. And the fact that the Mass General Law actually empowers the Historical Commission to propose scenic roads, irrespective of what you think should be a scenic road or not should be a scenic road, and there's, maybe there's some room for debate on that. I don't know if the planning board will take it up between now and the fall. However, there is an opportunity, I think, for historical in this, and for the Conservation Commission for that matter. So it's all very vague, I would say, at the moment, but Ms. Luttrell, who I anticipate is going to end up running the planning board very shortly, we kind of briefly touched on the possibility of doing some work together on this subject. And so I wanted to put it out there because I think the more we do this, the more it's just good for everybody, that I want them. I think the planning board and the historical commission, quite frankly, are natural allies on a great many things, and can do some help to each other on a great many things. And this may be one of them. And so, in fact, had that not been that little mistake on the slide, very innocent mistake and the fault of us for not having a better logo, had that not been there, it might not have caught my attention so strongly. And I thought, well, jeepers, like I said, trees and stone walls, we should care about that way. If we care about the trees in the old burial ground, we should care about the trees on the historic, on the scenic roads in town. So I don't know if you folks have any thoughts on that. It's all, and this is of course entirely the planning board's baby. This is not an attempt to sort of weasel into their deal. It was an offer of potential help. And I think if maybe a little bit of input from our voices, however we end up feeling about it, might be helpful for them to get where they need to go to win over the floor in the fall. So is that something that interests the rest of you all, or? And it may require, if you haven't, read closely those particular articles, to go back and, read what, because it's thick. I mean, the tree thing was a long article, and the scenic roads was also, well, it was, slightly controversial. That's why it got held. But I think I'm interested in the idea of working with them a little bit and trying to see, because I think, again, our interests are naturally aligned with trying to protect trees and stone walls without, unduly, putting out private citizens, let's say, who want to trim a tree or something. If there's a way to find for that to be done, I am personally supportive.
As you know, I've sat in on a lot of those meetings, and discussion has often come up about the fact that scenic road designations are often under the purview of the Historical Commission. So I think it's a natural partnership, whether or not it's something that we just let them know, so that at special town meeting, they can say, and they have the support of the Historical Commission.
Right.
I think that the Conservation Commission may do the same. I could be speaking out of turn, so I apologize if that's wrong, but I know that discussion came up. So I'm certainly in support of discussing it further. And I think it's a pretty natural partnership. I agree with you there, Kevin.
Well, yeah, I thought that even I saw if we were to have any role, and if they wanted us, right? They haven't decided that. I mean, they have to take that to their, membership and discuss it. But if they wanted us to kind of come along, my thought was, at the very least, we could all inform ourselves thoroughly on it, discuss it in a meeting, and take a vote, whether we support it or not. In the same way that, Mr. Dennington asked our support of this, hearing for bylaw changes kind of article, and we discussed it, read it, and we took a vote. We supported it. Even that, I think, again, because it's in our interest, and also because I really do think it's good for the town and for town government, for boards and commissions to talk more and cooperate more, and silo less. So,
And support each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And I could direct everybody to the town website. There's a lot of, yes, the bylaws, but in the warrant, if you all have that, but also there's a lot of summary of what the bylaw does, and what, some of the questions and concerns that people had on the planning board page on the town website, all the minutes. There's quite a few summaries in there.
Well, I'll just leave it at that. And because again, this is going to be down the road, but I wanted to throw it out on the table. And actually, we're not supposed to discuss it, right? Substantively, I was just really trying to give information. All right, so public comment. Oh, thankfully, we've reached that moment, having driven almost everybody away. But there are a few intrepid souls left. So if any of you wish to speak, now is your moment. Going once, going twice, sold. All right. We do have our next meeting is scheduled. I have no idea when it is. It's in June. Does anybody know off the top of their heads? I'll bring it up.
I
June
have
16th.
my calendar up. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
June 16.
June 16th. Okay, good.
Which is my and Andrew's 10-year wedding anniversary. And I'm gonna spend it with you guys.
Oh, wow. Are you sure?
Yeah,
No.
it's fine.
Wow. Well, that is self-sacrificing. Holy moly. Well, congratulations in advance.
Oh, thank you.
And I will hope to see at least a few of you, as well as Dottie for sure, at the volunteer breakfast on the 18th. Why not, right? You know, free Danish and free coffee or whatever, you know. I think that's it. I'm very grateful to Dave, who, you know, we kind of came in a sort of scattered way tonight, but Dave is back with us, recovering from injury, and I'm so grateful to have him here, and thanks. And I hope, Dave, you're feeling much better, or that we didn't just cause you a grievous setback having to sit up and listen to this for 2 hours, but thank you. And motion to adjourn, anybody? Am I missing anything? Good. All right. Thanks.
Nope. Motion to adjourn.
Second,
All right. Moved and seconded. I'll take a roll call vote. Kate Battles,
Yes.
Jim Blaschke,
aye.
Rebecca Deansrow,
Aye.
Annie Pfaff,
Yes.
Kevin Miller says aye, and we are adjourned. And thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good to see you all.
Likewise.